Hello. First, I want to say I just adore the gifts that I'm getting on my bed, and so
But you did not have nearly as much fun as Jerry and Esther and Jackie did in selecting them. In other words, they've been having fun with them for months.
well, it's been, I'll tell you, especially that clock. I got that clock, and ever since I got that clock, every time I even think about the concept of time, suddenly I just have this thing in my head that time means check how I feel. Time means check how I feel. And I just love that. It just turns me around like that. So I really, really appreciate it. I'm glad you had fun in it. My question is actually about step 2, which is not supposed to be our job. And it's sort of a twofold question. Number one, if we are also non-physical, we're physical and non-physical all mixed up together, then wouldn't step 2 be our job? And also, just how does step 2 work?
It's none of your business. It's a good question because you're right. We are encouraging you to find vibrational alignment with that which is source. And so, yes, then you become part of that energy that is summoning that. It's interesting. Let's talk about this from the standpoint of law of attraction. You get it that this universe is based on attraction, that there's no exclusion, everything is inclusion. So something's summoning something. So here you are in this physical body. Well, how did you get here? Well, from your non-physical perspective, you saw yourself there. You projected a thought that then summoned unto itself. So from non-physical, you projected a thought that then had summoning power that summoned you forward. So far, so good?
Yes.
So now you're here in this body having experiences which are causing you to project thought, which Source is agreeing with, that's summoning you back. In other words, this is the eternal continuum that's taking place.
Okay, but you said Source is agreeing with it, but we are also Source, right?
Well, you are Source. You are Source energy in a physical body. So Source expressed itself forward and became you. Then you express yourself forward and become Source. Then Source expresses itself forward and becomes you. And so that's what people mean when they accurately translate that we are all truly one. But you've got to accept that as a personal consciousness in a human body, that you are having experiences that sometimes you can feel have you separated from that which is source. So this whole business about art of allowing is about learning the art of being in a body where you can explore contrast, where you can give birth to new desires, that source joins immediately, and then your work is to bring yourself back into alignment. And so you're right. It is the becoming one with source that the art of allowing really is about, isn't it?
So when you say that when you ask, it's 99.99999% made, why would not it be 100% made and it's just the allowing?
That is not what we said. What we say is when you launch your rocket of desire, in other words, the contrast causes you to launch this rocket of desire, but you are continually amending that. And what we are saying is that 99% of it is complete before you see the evidence of it. And so someone who is attracting a magnificent mate to them, at first they're lonely. They launch a rocket. Well, they're nowhere near that 99% of completion that is necessary. And as they're lonely and missing and jealous, you've got a wonderful relationship and I don't, and belligerent, I came from a broken home so I didn't learn good relationship skills. Still, that 99% hasn't even begun. In other words, Source is over there. Source is absolutely in alignment with it, but your 99% of work has not begun yet. And then you meet somebody who has a wonderful relationship, and you begin to notice what a wonderful relationship is, and you begin to feel softer in your emotion about it. You begin to feel hopeful. Well, in your hopeful, you begin fulfilling some of that 99%. In other words, you begin moving toward it. In your hopefulness, you're about 30% of the way there. In your hopefulness and in your expectation, you're 30 or 35% there. Now you've moved enough into hopefulness that you begin to attract examples of wonderful relationships. And people tell you things like, well, I didn't always have this wonderful relationship. I was lonely for a long long time, and I thought that my perfect partner would never come. And then something happened, and then I met them, and here they are, and I'm living happily ever after. And now your hopefulness turns to a little bit more faith and a little bit more trust, and you start feeling a little better. And now you're 35, 45, 55, 65% there. And now you've stopped feeling the sting of loneliness. Now you don't feel lonely at all. Now you're feeling optimistic that your partner is coming. And in your optimism, you're 60%, 65%. You're beginning to feel better. Your optimism is beginning to turn to belief. Now you're not doubting that your partner will come. It's not a matter of if your partner will come. It's just a matter of when. And when isn't a big issue because you're living happily ever after right now. You're having a joyful journey right now. You're enjoying the interaction that you have with so many right now. Now you're 65, 75, 80% along, and now you're beginning to feel a certainty. Now you're beginning to feel the energy. Now you're beginning to feel that something is going to pop. Now you're beginning to feel that you're right on the brink of something. Now you're beginning to feel that something is right on the horizon, and now you're sort of in anticipation looking for the evidence of that. And now you're 75, 85, 95% there. You see what we're getting at? And now you're there in terms of vibration. You are so close to being there. People say, has your partner came? And you say, does it really matter? It will be any moment. I can feel that I'm coming. I'm living so joyfully that I feel no lack about this subject whatsoever. That's what we mean, that 99% of every creation is complete before there is any physical evidence about it. Now, along the way, you may have seen some evidence, but most of you are not very happy with the evidence that isn't the real deal. In other words, you're not really wanting that feeling of current moving. What you're wanting is to see the whites of their eyes, you see. And so what we're wanting you to understand, that's what we mean. In other words, it's your job to bring yourself into vibrational compliance with the things that you're asking for.
Well, in that, you know...
That was good, by the way.
Yes.
Really, really good.
It was very good.
A very, very clarifying question.
In that instance, because that's really interesting, because that's a distinction of wanting something that you really don't see as like maybe physical, but there's a whole, it's not just any person, versus a physical object that you might even be like the whales. I saw whales 1,000,000 times, you know, and the other person didn't see them perhaps just because they weren't in an allowing state, but I saw whales, but that's obvious to me.
Let's talk about this, because why would you see whales and someone who really wants to see whales not see whales?
Because I see whales all the time and it's easy for me.
That's exactly right, but here's the thing, this is the reason that we don't want you to compare yourself with anyone else, because it's the ratio between the degree of your wanting and the degree of your allowing. And so someone could really not care very much about something and also not be offering any resistance about it, and so they get it all the time. But it doesn't ring their bells like somebody who really, really wanted it. In other words, when he sees his whale, and he will, you're going to hear it all over the ship. In other words, he really cares about seeing that whale, where you said, oh, I'm another whale. Oh, there's another whale. Oh, that whale's in my way. I was hoping to see what was behind it. In other words...
But actually my distinction is, so that's a physical whale that I have full belief is in the ocean. With a relationship or something that's harder to see, when you say 99%, is that, and that's back to the question of how that step 2 happens. Am I actually molding, like as I'm molding myself and becoming more of what I really want, you know, honing that down, there may not actually be a person that's just like the way I really want it. Are they out there also pulling that vibration as we're pulling that vibration together, and that's that 99% that becomes 100% that's actually being created in that moment?
That whale is in the ocean.
Wow.
But your belief is not. And the 99% is the bringing yourself from doubting to hoping to believing to knowing, you see. Once you get in the hoping range, things start popping that make you feel good. Until you're in the hopeful range, you don't see much evidence of manifestation. But once you get into that hopeful range, things start turning up. Once you get into the believing range, more things start showing up. And there is a wonderful creative workshop or range between hoping and believing. And once you are really leaning into that believing, that's the time for you to now turn your attention to what it is that you're wanting. Because from that place of believing, you can fill in all of the gaps. Oh yeah, I forgot, make him rich. Oh yeah, and one other thing.
Yes.
Of course, you've already done that long before. In fact, you started there.
And finally, what I'm still wanting to, I guess I really want to know some more details about just really the how-to of step 2. And the reason I really, and I've been thinking about this a long time.
Well, why do you want to know the how-to of something that is not your work?
The reason I want to know the how-tos is because of the belief factor. Because anytime I get excited about something and I search for any evidence, and in a scientific thing, it doesn't matter. I understand that science isn't really true unless I make it true. But sometimes when I hear it in a way that I get excited about, it just does something that gives me the belief that I just get so excited that I can start creating way beyond I've ever created before. And so thinking of something that's not really my job, but a little bit of my job that would make me so Harry Potter-like.
Well, the way it works, the reason that step 2 works in the way it does is because when you have an experience that causes you to clarify a desire, we give our undivided attention to speaking of Abraham, speaking of all the energies that surround us, speaking of the energy that is your inner being, speaking of source, all that is non-physical, that is infinitely aware of you, we all turn our undivided attention relative to that topic to what you are now asking for. And so the answer that we want to give you is that we are so good at visualizing the outcome that you have set into motion. But we have the capacity as this infinite mind to integrate this new thing that you just launched over there with all of the other things that you'd launched there before. And so you might say that we've all got our hands in the clay of our co-creation. And the thing that we want you to feel is that we feel such appreciation for your exposure to the contrast that gave you the leading edge pioneer clarity of even deciding what you wanted. In other words, we revel in every new distinction that you come to, you see. And then we shine that light. We be that vibration. We hold our tone. We broadcast our signal so that you're going to feel with greater definition than you've ever felt before your proximity to it. That's why we say when someone begins Abraham work, it feels like all hell is broken loose in their experience, because when you start being deliberate, we hold that tone. And as we hold that tone, your relationship to that tone becomes evident to you. That's why the emotion feels stronger, you see. So every time you feel emotion, whether it feels good to you or whether it doesn't feel good to you, stop and say, this emotion that I'm feeling is evidence of source energies undivided attention to what I want. In other words, this is the helpful signal. If you were in a ship or lifeboat and there was a lighthouse sending a foghorn saying, come here, this is the point of land, and you were in the fog where you could not see, wouldn't you love listening for that? And so the signal that we are offering is the culmination of all that you've asked for, even the things you don't right now remember because you don't have the ability to focus on it all at once, but we do. So as you listen for what feels good, and don't beat upon yourself when it doesn't feel good, but lean in the direction of what feels good, pretty soon you'll get a beat on the signal, and it feels almost as good to be in the stream that's reeling you in toward the well-being that is waiting for you as it does of already getting there. You get so good at enjoying being in the flow. In the flow. What do we mean? In the flow. In the flow of the energy that I have set into motion before my birth and added to every day of my life. In the flow of completing the cycle of non-physical, physical, non-physical, physical, non-physical, physical, non-physical, physical, non-physical, physical. It is so good. Yes.
It is so good. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed.